Welcome to another coding tutorial, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make these set of clocks based on where my audience is from. This tutorial is my take on basic data visualization, and the data that I'm using is based on the top 16 countries of where my audience is watching my content from in the past 28 days. And I got this data from the YouTube Analytics page. Let's look at the data. So I have a total of 3 columns and 17 rows, where the first row is the name of the title of each of these columns. So we have country, and so this is actually the data that I can see from my YouTube's page. So we have the United States, the UK, India, Thailand, Germany, Canada, France, Brazil, the Netherlands, Italy, South Korea, Japan, Spain, Switzerland, Turkey, and Mexico. You guys are coming from everywhere, and because I cannot see the city's data, I just pull out the name of the capital city of these countries. And also in the third column, I have the time difference between Bangkok, which is where I'm from and where this computer clock is based on, and the time of these capital cities. Before we look into how to use the data, I want to start by making a clock. I'm going to start by drawing a circle using an ellipse function, which takes in a total of 4 arguments. The first 2 are the x and y coordinates of the center of the circle, and then the width and the height. I want to draw this circle in the middle of the canvas, but I want the origin to be in the center of the canvas also. So first, I'm going to use the translate function to move the origin point from this point here to the middle of the canvas. So width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. And with that, I can put in 0, 0 as the x and y coordinates of the center of the circle. And then for the third and the fourth, I'm going to put r times 2 and r times 2, where r is the radius, which I'm going to set at 200. I'm also going to increase my canvas size to 500 by 500, and let's try that. All right. The reason that I'm drawing this circle is because I want to show you the path at which I want to draw the smallest circles, 12 to be exact, so that it lies on this path. And we can do that by first figuring out what are the x and y coordinates of these smaller circle. And we're going to do that by converting from polar coordinates to Cartesian coordinates using an equation x equals to r times cosine of angle and y equals to r times sine of angle. And I'm going to initialize angle at 0, and also inside setup, I'm going to set the angle mode to degrees. And then I'm going to draw the circle at location x and y, and how about we set a size at 10. All right, so now we have this circle at this point here where angle equals to 0. So now I actually want to draw a total of 12 circles. So we can do that by using a for loop that goes from I equals to 0 to I less than 12, right? How about we set that as a variable called hnum for the number of circles for the hour ring. So hnum here, I plus plus, then we just need to move x and y in here, and also the smaller circle. All right, so what should be the angle? So we want to space out each of the smaller circles evenly across the path here. So first we need to figure out what is the angle that would space these out evenly, and we can do that by first dividing 360 by 12, which is hnum. 360 because that is 1 revolution of a circle in terms of angles, right? So we do that, and then we need to multiply it by I so that we know what is the actual location of each of the circle. Let's click run. All right, and we can delete this big circle. So now we have a total of 12 circles, and we know that this is the first one, but just to show you again, I'm going to write a conditional statement that says if I is equal to 0, then let's color it black, else color it white, and then we need to put this circle afterwards. So this is the first one, but actually because of a clock, I want the first circle to be this one at 12 o'clock. So to do that, we need to rotate it counterclockwise by 90 degrees. So we can use the rotate function and provide an argument at -90. All right. And then now I'm going to use the actual clock data. And before we do that, I'm going to print out the three functions that we're going to use, which are hour, minute, and second, to get the real-time clock data. Let's print. All right, so we have 12, 12, 52, 53. So right now it is at 12 o'clock, 12 minutes, and 57 seconds. And so for this first ring, we only just want the hour data, which is 12. So to do that, I'm going to first declare a new variable called h_angle. So to place these angle on my circle here, I need to know where it should be relative to each of these circles, right? So we can do that using the same equation essentially. So first we need to divide 360 by h_num, but instead of multiplying by I, we just multiply it by hour. And then after that, we just need to add h_angle inside these two equations here. And by adding this, it allows us to change the starting angle, or the angle at which the circle I equals to 0 is starting at. So if I click run, you will see that it's still at the same location, and that is because right now it is at 12 o'clock. But let's say if I were to change this to, let's do 13, we would move it to this one, right? So let's go back to hour. All right. Next, I want to color this clock. So first, I'm actually going to delete this. And I want to color it in a way that is a gradient. But first, we need to declare two more colors, two variables, C1 and C2. And I want to set C1 to be this color and C2 to be this color. So we have bright pink and light blue. Perfect. And now inside here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a new variable called C3, and C3 is going to be between these two colors, C1 and C2, and we can use a function called lerp_color that allows us to interpolate between two colors. So it takes in a total of 3 arguments. The first 2 are the 2 colors, and the third is going to be the amount that we want to interpolate. Let's say that we want to interpolate 50%. And let's fill it. So this C3 color, by giving this amount, which range between 0 and 1, we give it at 0.5. That means that it is going to pick a color that is halfway between this bright pink and this light blue. So we'll get something that is light purple-ish. So let's try that. And as you can see here, it's all purple. But actually, I don't want it to be all the same colors. So we're going to vary this amount. So how about we set this as a variable called amount, AMT, and then amount will be between what, 0 and 1. And that 0 and 1 is going to depend on which circle it is. So how about we move all of these inside the for loop? And how do we figure out that? So we're going to use the same logic as when we figure out the angle here. So first we need to divide the 12 circles evenly, and we can do that by just dividing 1 by h_num, or 12, right? So 1/12, and then we just multiplied it by I. And let's click run. All right, and as you can see here, this is the first circle, right? Where circle I equals to 0, we get the color bright pink, and then it just slowly go to purple, 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 and then blue, which is the last one where amount becomes 1. Perfect. How about we also set the stroke to this color as well. All right, before we move on, I also want to draw a line. And I want this line to be from the center of the circle to X and Y. How about we also change the color of the background so that it's easier to see? And I want it to be this color. Great. Now, I'm going to put all of this inside a class. So you just need to come to this arrow here, click the plus sign, and then click create file. And then I'm going to call it clock.js. Before we start writing a class, let's go to index.html and then come to this line of code, copy and paste, Then change this name to the name of your new file. In my case, it's clock.js, and this is how you integrate a new JavaScript file into your program. Let's go back to clock.js. We're ready to write a class. So start with the word class. I'm gonna name this class clock, and then we're gonna start with the constructor function. So let's see, what do we need to put inside this constructor function? So right now we have declared the radius, which is the radius of this ring. We have angle. Actually, we don't need this angle anymore because we're calculating the angle inside this for loop. We have hnum, which dictates the number of circles in this ring. How about we actually just leave this as global variables, but actually what we need inside the clock constructor function will be this.x and this.y, and this will be the location of the center of the ring. I'm going to write a method called display ring. So basically, I want to have a method called display ring and also another method called display clock, where we're going to be calling this display ring method inside this display clock method. Actually, why don't we just do that now? To call a method inside a class, basically we just need to put in the word this dot and then the name of the method. And we're going to call it 3 times. For the hour ring, the minute ring, and then the second ring. All right, so inside here, we're going to copy and paste all of this. All right. Okay, so actually the translate and the rotate function will be inside the display clock method because we only want to do it just once, right? For all of these. So just once for one clock. And then we want to change width divided by 2 and height divided by 2 here to be this.x and this.y. And then inside here, because we're going to be doing each of these based on if it's a minute ring, hour ring, or second ring. So how about we provide parameters here? The first one will be num. So we can change this to num. And also, how about this hour here? We're going to put time. So we'll be providing the functions, the clock functions, hour, minute, and second as an argument. And then how about we change the name to times underscore angle here. Okay, I think that should be it. And then inside here, we need to put in num and time, right? So how about I declare 3 variables for hour, minute, and second here. And then let's put, so for num, let's go back to sketch.js. We want to also declare 2 more. One for minute num, which we're going to set at 60, right? So 60 minutes per hour, and for second it is going to be 60 as well. All right, we go back to clock.js, and now we can put in hnum and hnum and m, and then snum and s here. All right, I think that should be it. Let's try to make this one clock. Let's declare a variable called clock, and clock is going to be a new clock at same location, right? Let's do it at width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. Inside here, we're going to call display clock method. Let's try this. All right, so you can only see the second ring. Why is that? The color looks really nice though. That is because actually we need one more. We need one more parameter here. Because right now the radius is all the same. So how about we set the radius as this.r here, and then inside here we need another parameter r. And we want each of these rings to have different radii. So let's do hour to be the smallest one. So let's do this.r minus this.r divided by 2. So it's half the size. And then for minute, let's do this.r minus this.r divided by 4. And then for second, we just want it to be the size of what we want the radius of, well, what we have r set as. Let's try that. All right. Oh, we need to provide the new argument in here. R, right? Okay, so now it is at 12:25 p.m. Perfect. Before we move on, I just want to change the aesthetics of how this clock looks first. And this is just based on my preference. I just want to experiment first. So how about I create put another parameter in here. I'm going to call it second. And this is going to be a Boolean variable that says, if second is true, then I want to draw the line. But else, keep it as an ellipse. Oh, and then we need to provide these new argument. So for this will be false for hour, right? This also will be false, but then for second it will be true. One more thing that I want to change. So instead of having that line starts from the origin, I want it to start at a point that I choose. So let's set two more variables, x2 and y2, and it's going to be at a specific radius. And I want this radius to actually be this.r divided by, how about half the size, times 2 cosine of, it has to be time angle, right? I want it to be where the time is. And then y2 will also be this.r divided by 2 times sine of time angle. And then instead of 0, 0 here, we'll set x2, y2 here. All right, that looks cool. How about we move it a little bit closer? Let's do divided by 5. All right, okay. I'm gonna leave it as this, and you can change the style of your clock as you wish. All right, so now let's look at the data that we have prepped earlier. First, what we need to do is that we need to download it as a CSV file. And now that we have the file, what we need to do is that we need to come to this arrow here, click the plus sign, and then click create folder. I'm gonna call my folder assets, and then inside the folder, you just need to upload the file. And this is where you drag your file where you just downloaded. All right, and now my file is uploaded here. And actually you can upload your file in the same directory as all of these files here, but I choose to put it inside a folder called assets. All right, so now you need to go back to sketch.js, and how you will upload this is that you need to preload the file into your program before you run setup or draw. And you can do that by first declaring a variable called table, and then you want to use a function called preload, and then you're going to set table to another function called load table and provide 3 arguments. The first one will be where your file is, so it's in the folder assets. Then you need to do backslash and then the name of your file. So mine, it's called timezone.csv. The second one is you need to put in your file type. So it is CSV. And then the third one, actually this one is optional, but I'm gonna put header, and that is to indicate that the first row of my table is the titles, right? So we have country, capital city, and time difference. And so when we do that, basically when we call out the number of rows and number of columns in the table, it will ignore that first one. All right, and then let's click run just to make sure everything is working, and it is working. I'm actually going to comment the clock out for now. Next, let's look at the p5.js table reference page just to see what are the different functions that we can call to extract the data. So the methods that I want to focus on in this tutorial is get row count and get column count. So if we go back, how about we set rows, a variable rows to table.getRowCount. And the reason that we need to put table here is because this is a method within the p5 table class, right? And we need to call that method on a specific object, and that object is called table. How about we try to print rows first? So we get 16, right? And that is because we put header here. Let's actually, what if we delete this? Now we get 17, you see? So it ignore the first row when we put in header. All right, and now how about we set columns to table.getColumnCount. And we're gonna print this out too. So we get 16 rows and 3 columns, which is exactly what we have. All right, so now how we can actually pull out the data. Let's see what are the other methods that we need. So the one that I want you to focus on, there are 3. So there's getNum, and there's getString. So with getNum and getString, it returns a value inside the table in the type of a number. This is getNum. For getString, it is the same thing, but returns in the type of a string. But for get, this one I'm actually not entirely sure because it says string and number here. So if you know whether your data is a number or a string, I recommend you use getNum or getString to avoid getting errors. But why don't we start with just get, and the syntax is get row comma column. So let's try that. All right, so what we're gonna do is that I'm gonna use a for loop that goes through my columns and my rows. And then we need to put table.get, right? Get what? It was rows comma columns. So we just do j comma I. Okay, so it goes through, my nested for loop goes through column first and then all the rows, right? So the first columns, we get the name of all the countries down to Mexico, and then we have the capital city starting with Washington, D.C. down to Mexico City, and then we have the time difference here from -11 to -13. So this is how you get the value. So actually if I do getNum, all right, so it actually doesn't print anything out because I think, what if I put in column as 2 because there are numbers there. All right, so getNum returns the numbers here, which is correct. And if I do string, I think I can only do, if I put I here, odd. It still print out the numbers, but maybe it returns these numbers as a string. But I'm gonna use getNum, and we're gonna put in the column as 2 because we want the time difference between the cities, right? So this is how you do it. Now, how about we start by, instead of using the clock data, which is based in Bangkok, we're gonna do it based on, how about, which country should we choose? How about we do the UK, City of London, which is -7 from the current time. So the current time is 12:37. So what is it in London? It is 5:37 a.m. in London. So 5 a.m. okay? All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to clock.js, and then what we need to do is that right now we're setting h, m, and s to the hour, minute, and second functions here. So I'm going to create a new method. How about we call it calculateTime? And we're going to set a new variable. Let's call it time difference, time diff, and then we're going to set it to table.getTime. num, right? Of what? How about we also set a new variable called city index, because we want to get the index that we're gonna pull out the data from the table, right? And that will be here, this dot city index, which is for the argument of the row. And then for column, we want the column equals to 2, right? Which is the third column. And then now I'm actually going to copy and paste these 3 variables inside here. And instead of using let h, m, and s, we're going to do this dot to make sure that we can see this variable inside a new function here, the other method here. All right, so now hour will be this function hour plus the time difference, right? How about we print this dot h? Oh, we don't see anything because we haven't called calculateTime function yet. And so to call this, we need to put in this dot and then the name of the method, this dot calculateTime. Oh, also I commented out this, so oops. Get num cannot read property of undefined. Oh, I also need to put in what is the 4th argument here. So if we go back to here, so this is index of row equals to 0. So for the UK, for London, it will be index of 1. So we want to put 1 in here. Let's try that. And then we need to put this dot on all of this. All right, we will get this. We'll get this very soon. All right, so it's at 5 o'clock. And now our clock is updated accordingly. So it's 5 a.m. 40 minutes and 30 seconds in London. This actually worked for most of the times, but if you come back to time zone here, you can see that all of these numbers are integers except for New Delhi, which I never understood how the time difference could be at a 30-minute increment, but India and New Delhi specifically is 1.5 hour behind Bangkok. So we need to adjust this function slightly. So if we come back here, we need to use a conditional statement that says if, and we can use a JavaScript function that checks whether a number is an integer or not, and that is inside a number class, number.is integer, and then we put in an argument of time diff. So if this number, if time diff is an integer, then we will do what we have here. Else, when it is not an integer, we need to do something else. And to understand how we're going to fix this, let's go to a new sketch. It's a little bit tricky because we need to figure out what is the minute hand, because that is going to impact our hour, right? Because it's in a 30-minute increment. So to make it easier, let's look at this in a blank sketch. So let's set that the time difference is 1.5, right? So for the hour, we want to either add the hour function to -1 or -2. So first, I just want to show you that we can use the function called floor to get the hour here. So floor of time diff, it will get us the integer of this number rounded down. And as you can see here, we get -2, and that is because rounded down for a negative number, you get a bigger number, right? So -2. But if, let's say that minute is equals to 45, right? So let's say that it's 12:45 right now. So in India, in New Delhi, it will be 11:15. So 11:15 for the hour, we just want to subtract it by 1, but we have 2 here. So we're going to say that if minute is greater than 30, then what we want to do is we want to set hour to be equals to hour plus floor of time diff plus 1, right? So let's see, we're gonna print h here. So we should get 11, right? But then if the minute is, let's say it's 15, then we want h to be equals to hour plus just floor of time diff 10, right? So let's say that it's 12:15. In New Delhi it would be 10:45. So how about if it's 30? Then we'll still get 10. Actually, it has to be more than or equals to 30, right? Because at 12:30, it has to be 11. All right, so now we figure out how we would deal with the hour hand. But for the minute hand, we want to get this value here, the decimal point inside this float number. So what we need to do is that m will be equals to minute plus, so what we can do is actually, let me just show you how we would figure this out. So let's call it a, not the best variable, but a will be equals to time diff, and we're going to use an operator called modulo, and then 1. And then let's print a. You can see that we get negative 0.5. And that is because the modulo operator returns the remainder between the division of these two numbers, time diff and 1. And when you divide whatever number by 1, the remainder is whatever is the decimal point of that number, right? And we want to do this, and we also want to multiply it by 60 minutes, right, to get the minute. So if we do that, then we get negative 30. And so all we need to do now is for the minute hand, we just want to do minute plus this. We're printing m, which is 23. Oh, because we are doing the actual minutes, so we need min here just to see. So min right now is 15, right? So 15 plus this should be negative 30. So we get negative 15. But in our calculation, it's okay to get the negative 15 as the minutes because that will equate to 45. 60 minus 15 is 45. So how about we copy and paste this in our sketch? So else, right? Else what? So we don't need that h here. So if minute, if the actual minute is more than or equals to 30, then this dot h will be equals to hour plus floor of time diff plus 1. Else this dot h will be hour plus floor of time diff, and then this dot m will be equals to minute plus time diff mod 1 times 60, and then this dot second will stay the same. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. I think this should work, but we need to go back to our table. So new daily is when I equals to 2. So let's just test it. So we're gonna put 2 in here. All right, so we have 11, 20, 26, 11, 26. So in Thailand right now, it's 12:56. So 11:26 is 1 hour and 30 minutes behind, which is correct. Now that we figure out how to pull out the data from the table and then adjusted the time accordingly, let's make 16 clocks. So we're going to change from this variable clock to an array called clocks. And then I'm going to create 3 more variables, columns, which we're going to set to 4, rows, same thing for, and then size. And then inside here, I'm going to delete all of this. We're going to set size to be equals to width divided by columns. And then we're gonna use a nested for loop that goes from I equals to 0 to I less than columns, I plus plus, for let j equals to 0, j less than rows, and j plus plus. And then you might be familiar with this step. We're going to populate the clocks array with a bunch of new 1D arrays, and then we're going to create clock objects, right? New clock objects. So new clock, then what do we need? We need the x and y location of the center of each of the clocks. So how about we set x and y to be equals to I times size and j times size. And I'm going to put x and y in here. The third one is the radius. The radius here, we're going to set it as size divided by 2 because size is going to be the size of the diameter of the clocks, right? So for radius, it's size divided by 2. And then the fourth one here is the index at which we're going to pull out the row data, right? So how about I delete this first? We're going to call it city index. And because the data inside the row is a 1D array, right? But we're having this I and j as a 2D array. And we can use an equation, j times rows plus I. And that will convert from a 2D index value to a 1D index. And then we can just put city index in here. And let's try that. Oops, columns. Clocks is not defined. Oh, we also need to call display clocks on all of our clocks, right? So we can just copy and paste this, delete all of these, and then we're going to call display clock method. All right, okay. Do you know what is wrong here? If you have seen many of my tutorials, you might be familiar with this step, but I forgot to put in the two important functions when we do any type of transformation, which are push and pop. So push saves the transformation, right? In this case, the translate function and the rotate function here. And then we need to use another function called pop to return it back to the original setting, which is where the origin is at the top left corner of the canvas before we call these transformation functions again, so that it translates to this dot x and this dot y relative to the original settings. If I click run, all right. But as you can see here, I need to move everything out by size divided by 2 and size divided by 2 to the right and down. So let's start by doing that. So in here, we're going to put size divided by 2 and size divided by 2. All right. How about we give a little bit of slight margin between each of the clocks? Okay. And then the last piece is that I want to actually I'm hard coding this, but you can adjust it more efficiently. But how about I make the size here to be 7? It's too big. How about 5? 3? I think 5 looks good. Okay, so this is my take on data visualization based on the data from you guys. But I have so many more ideas of things that I want to do with data visualization. And if you have a suggestion, please leave them down in the comments. Give this one a try.